around the middle of World War I, on December 29th, 1915, the French Commander-in-Chief, Joseph Joffre, and Field Marshal Douglas Haig of the British had begun to discuss plans to make a grand defensive attack along a 60-mile section of trench line. These plans consisted of a continuous artillery shelling leading up to the attack, which would serve to completely decimate the German defenses and aid an additional infantry charge across no man's land to overtake the already battered trenches. Although this battle plan could have been effective under different circumstances, there were several additional factors that were not foreseen by the British and French combined military leadership.
The British did have very strong artillery and bombarded the Germans and with approximately, I think I read somewhere around 1.7 artillery shells over 8 days. And that amount of firepower is just incredibly overwhelming. But so many of the shells were high explosive shells that landed in relatively soft mud, didn't explode. So many of them were shrapnel, that a shrapnel shell will explode at an altitude and just rain fragments down on the enemy. But the Germans were all underground. That was where the Germans really had a technological edge, if you were looking for one, that they had trenches where they could survive underground in these bunkers that they had built. And it is not at all comfortable being on the receiving end of such a nonstop bombardment, but the majority of them were at least protected. And so all those shrapnel shells just rained down on empty foxholes and empty bunker emplacements. And then when the artillery was over, those Germans were able to move out of their bunkers that were far underground and set up their machine guns. And so all of that artillery expense did nothing to put the edge onto the British side, much to the unfortunate surprise of the men who were in that first wave. I read that something like 85% of British casualties were from the machine gun. I mean, because these guys, 20,000 men died on the first day. And to put that in maybe to perspective, I think a lot of us we often think of the American experience at Omaha Beach and how just incredibly destructive that was and dangerous, of running out of those landing craft onto that German defended beach at Normandy. But the casualties that suffered at the Somme on that first day, it was 8 times. 8 times the casualty rate. And they kept on going.
Despite the unprecedented number of casualties, the British and French forces pressed on, continuing to fight over the next few months as new technologies and weapons entered the battlefield.
The use of tanks at the Somme was landmark in a lot of ways, with only 9 getting to the German trenches. The tanks they were able to move at about 4 miles per hour back then, which is incredibly slow. I mean, that's just barely faster than average walking speed. And obviously runner can easily surpass a tank. But the beauty of the tanks is that if they could get across no man's land, they could crush barbed wire and thereby lead a path for following infantry. It was mobile artillery and mobile machine guns, and so that could play an incredible role. And so what it did was just set the stage of possibilities. And so within a year, the British are attacking German fortifications with 500 tanks at a time.
The introduction and use of the tank, combined with the little ground gained and heavy casualties that characterized World War I, make the Battle of the Somme an emblematic battle of the war.